For the reporters, kindly open your video para lang nakikita ko kayo. You can start anytime you're ready.
Hello, good morning, everyone. We are from Section B from Matienzo to Nueno, and we are going to present case 2. So, let's start with the case presentation first. So, for the subjective data, so for patient profile, patient SL is a 45-year-old female, baseline independent, and she presents with rotatory dizziness for 2 days duration. Next slide, please. And then we have the HPI. So 2 days prior to consultation, she complained of sudden rotatory dizziness, and episodes are brief, lasting for 30 seconds to 1 minute, and triggered by changes in head position associated with nausea and intake of dimenhydrinate. Then for the pertinent negatives, there's no hearing loss, tinnitus, ear fullness or pressure, weakness or numbness, double vision, difficulty in speaking, nor loss of consciousness. And for pertinent positives, we have rotatory dizziness and nausea. For past medical history, there has been a noted seasonal allergies, no known comorbidities, no history of ear infection, Meniere's disease, stroke, or any cardiovascular disorder. So for medications, the patient is noted to take multivitamins daily and ibuprofen occasionally and dimenhydrinate as needed. For social history, the patient is single and a non-smoker, occasional social alcohol use, and full-time office administrator for her work, and there's no recent travel or illness exposure. So there's also noted family history of hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and there are no known familial neurological or inner ear disorders for the patient's family. So for ROS, none noted for ENT na ear pain, discharge, or recent infection. So normal hearing 10. And then for neurological, there's no focal weakness, numbness, tingling, vision changes, or speech difficulties. And then unremarkable then for cardiovascular and for other systems. So for objective data, we have here the vitals. So within normal limits, everything. So this includes the BP 120 over 70, heart rate 86 beats per minute, and RR 18 cycles per minute, and temperature of 36.1 degrees Celsius, and O2 sat of 98% at room air. And then for ENT, cardiovascular, respiratory, and abdominal, normal yung findings. And then for neurological, the patient is awake, alert with regards, normal mental status, intact cranial nerves. For motor, good tone and bulk, 5 over 5 on all extremities, no deficits, and intact proprioception for sensory. And for reflex, no Babinski reflex noted. And then for cerebellar, there are no nystagmus, no dysdiadochokinesia, and the patient is able to do heel to shin. And for gait, the patient is also able to do tandem walk. And lastly, we have the special dizziness maneuvers. So for Dix Hall Pike right side, there's intense vertigo and torsional upbeating nystagmus. And for the left side, negative. And then for head impulse test and test of skew, both are negative.
So next is localization. First, the chief complaint of the patient is vertigo. So first, we should determine if this is a central or peripheral vertigo. So based on the patient, or the history of the patient, it can be localized peripherally since the vertigo of the patient is presents as sudden, brief, and pronounced, and mainly triggers by positional changes. Central vertigo can be initially ruled out since the patient has unremarkable neurologic exams and does not present with signs of neurologic deficits. In other words, the patient does not have any signs pointing to a disease that stems from the brain itself, particularly his brainstem or cerebellum. So looking at the table, this is an additional comparison between central and peripheral vertigo. So peripheral vertigo typically presents with intense or pronounced vertigo, as opposed to the milder vertigo often seen in central causes. For nystagmus, the central vertigo typically presents with pure horizontal or vertical nystagmus and may evoke may involve gaze-evoked directional changing nystagmus. It has usually no latency and may or may not show fatigability. In contrast, peripheral vertigo is associated with torsional unidirectional nystagmus, where the fast pace beats away from the affected side. So this type of nystagmus often shows a latency period before starting and typically fatigable when repeated testing is done. So in terms of the exam, central vertigo is more likely to be accompanied by abnormal brainstem or cerebellar signs, such as dysarthria, ataxia, or cranial nerve deficits. Meanwhile, peripheral vertigo usually shows a normal neurologic exam aside from the presence of nystagmus. So we can say that the lesion is a peripheral or a vestibular apparatus problem.
So after we initially determine if the vertigo is central or peripheral based on the history of the patient, we can perform a physical examination. And for the patient in this case, specific dizziness maneuvers was done to diagnose the etiology of the vertigo. So the first one is positive Dix-Hallpike on the right side, and this elicited a sudden onset of vertigo, which is a positional vertigo, and a nystagmus that has a rightward torsional component and an upbeating vertical component. These findings further indicate that the vertigo has a peripheral localization, particularly on the right ear. And for the second test, negative Dix-Hallpike on the left side, this further localizes the lesion towards the right ear, indicating that it has a unilateral involvement. For the third one, negative test of skew. So this further rules out central vertigo. A negative test of skew points out to a peripheral localization of vertigo. And for the last one, the negative head impulse test, this is contradicting because a negative HIT points to a central cause of vertigo. However, this most likely indicates that the vestibulo-ocular reflex or the VOR simply remains intact and helps in ruling out vestibular neuritis, which is true hypofunctionality of the vestibular system, and it is also one of the causes of the peripheral vertigo. So these findings, particularly the positive Dix-Hallpike on the right side, the sudden, brief, and positionally triggered vertigo, as well as the upbeating and rightward nystagmus, points to a lesion that is peripheral, particularly on the right vestibular apparatus of the ear. The upbeating and rightward nystagmus further localizes that the particular part of the vestibular apparatus that is affected is the right posterior semicircular canals. So the primary impression based on these findings or localization as well as the patient's clinical presentation will be discussed on the next slide.
So the primary impression is benign paroxysmal positional vertigo or BPPV. So why BPPV? Vertigo is sudden, brief, which is for about 30 to 60 seconds and triggered by change in head position or positional vertigo, which is a hallmark of BPPV. So no hearing loss, tinnitus, ear fullness, or neurologic deficits, which suggest peripheral in origin. Positive Dix-Halt Pike test on the right side with upbeating and torsional nystagmus, which is a classic diagnostic sign of posterior canal BPPV, which occurs at posterior semicircular canals. Head impulse test and skew test were negative, which suggest no central pathology.
BPPV is most commonly idiopathic, especially in middle-aged and older adults, meaning no clear cause is identified in most cases. However, some known triggers include head trauma, viral neurolabyrinthitis, and even conditions like osteoporosis. Studies have shown that head trauma precedes BPPV in around 17% of cases and viral neurolabyrinthitis in about 15%. Both of these can disrupt the inner-in environment and loosen autoconia. Another interesting association is with osteoporosis, which may reflect impaired calcium metabolism affecting both bone and inner ear structures like autoconia. So in our patient's case, she's a 45-year-old female with no recent illness, trauma, or infection. So most likely, her BPPV likely falls under the idiopathic category. This raises the possibility of early hormonal changes, particularly involving estrogen, which will be discussed later, plays an important role in maintaining the structure and adhesion of autoconia. Overall, her presentation, the sudden onset of brief positional vertigo without auditory symptoms, aligns most strongly with the typical idiopathic BPPV, likely involving age-related or hormonal weakening of the autolytic membrane.
So for the pathogenesis, the BPPV was caused by cupulolithiasis. This is when the autolytic crystals become detached from the macula of the utricle and saccule and attach themselves to the cupula of posterior semicircular canal. This debris or the calcium debris or autoconia particles detaches and forms a free floating autoconia in the endolymph of the canal, which is termed as canalolithiasis. Canalolithiasis. And on positional change, this gravitates to the most dependent part, which is most commonly in the posterior semicircular canal. Thus, whenever there is head movement, gravity affects the endolymph flow, causing the free-floating autoconia to abnormally stimulate the cupula of the semicircular canals, resulting in the symptoms of vertigo and nystagmus, which is triggered by changes in position and how fast these changes happen.
So for the risk factors of BPPV, number one would be the female sex. So we know that estrogen, as mentioned earlier, we know that estrogen plays an important role in the etiopathogenesis of BPPV. So due to the sharp changes in estrogen levels, most especially seen during old age in female gender, so estrogen, we know, plays an important role in the formation of specifically autoconin 90, a structural protein of autoconia. Estrogen also provides a neuroprotective, antioxidant, ion channel, and vascular effects in the inner ear. So in the presence of estrogen, there is a protective layer towards the that maintains the integrity of the saccule and the utricle. So the changes in estrogen in the female gender increases the risk for BPPV. So increasing age, specifically those greater than or equal to 65 years old, also are at an increased risk for BPPV due to the vestibular degeneration that comes with increasing age. So whenever we age, there is an observed weakness or loss of the structures that anchor the fibrils and subsequently connect the otoconia. So we know that these otoconias are calcium crystals that form part of the utricle and saccule and play an important role in the vestibular system. So the destruction of these otoconia can also be accounted for by the lack of sex hormones that are often seen in increased age, and as well as the absence of growth hormone secretion that is also associated with increased age. So another risk factor for BPPV would be previous or current ear conditions. So examples of these would be vestibular neuronitis, which also affects the production or the structure of the otoconia through the inflammation of the vestibular nerve, labyrinthitis, which causes the dislodgement of the otoconia into the semicircular canal, inner ear surgery, and Meniere's disease, which is an accumulation of fluid in the inner ear, which subsequently increases the risk of displacing the otoconia.
I would like to add another risk factors for BPV would include history of migraine, stroke, or any head injury. So these conditions can disturb the inner ear or brain pathways responsible for balance. Specifically, yung head injury, since nabanggit na, it can dislodge the calcium crystals from their normal position, causing vertigo to occur when they move into the circular canals. Di ba, since normally located sila sa utricle. Kaya pag na-move siya sa posterior semicircular canal, dun nag-occur yung vertigo. Then there are some studies then also that low serum vitamin D low serum vitamin D levels have shown to increase risk and recurrence among patients who have low vitamin D level. So yung vitamin D they help to stabilize the otoconia, and having low vitamin D levels make them more likely to break loose, which will increase the BPPV risk. Yeah.
Patients with benign paroxysmal positional vertigo typically present with brief recurrent episodes of vertigo that are triggered by specific head movements like turning in bed, tilting the head, or looking up. The vertigo is often described as a spinning sensation or a feeling that either the environment or the body is moving, even when still. During diagnostic tests, such as the Dix-Hallpike maneuver, a torsional type of nystagmus may be observed. It usually appears after a short delay, lasts briefly, and lessens with repeated testing. Some patients may also experience nausea or even vomiting during episodes. However, unlike other vestibular disorders, BPPV doesn't cause hearing loss or tinnitus, and neurologic exams are generally normal between attacks with no focal findings.
So I will present the differential diagnosis. The first one is migraine-associated vertigo. So sorry, I don't think it was mentioned earlier during the review of systems, but although the patient did not have vision changes, there was a parenthesis when we were given a case, no vision changes other than migraine aura. So this would suggest that the patient has had a history of migraine, which is one of the symptoms that would rule in migraine-associated vertigo. Other symptoms include visual aura, as I mentioned, and episodic. However, more symptoms that would point to migraine-associated vertigo are at least half of the episodes should be associated to migraine. And for migraine-associated vertigo, I think the symptom would last for about 5 minutes to up to 72 hours. So this is not the case for our patient. And then some symptoms that would rule out migraine-associated vertigo are other causes like BPPV, which is in our case aligned with our patient's symptoms and more related to positional triggers. So migraine-associated vertigo is not as related to positional triggers, although some readings would say that positional triggers can worsen the symptom, but not necessarily trigger them. Other symptoms that would rule out migraine-associated vertigo are cardiovascular issues and neurological conditions. So as we can see in this table, there are symptoms under the rule in that are negative for the patient, and there are positive for the rule out. So this would make an unlikely diagnosis for the patient. Next one, please. Next slide, please. The next one is vestibular neuritis. So just like BPPV, this has a sudden onset and also presents with nausea. However, it is very persistent. Readings would say that the duration of symptoms would last for days, even up to weeks, for severe cases up to months. And also it occurs at rest. So since the patient's symptoms are not as persistent and they are more related to head movement, this is again an unlikely diagnosis. And just for additional information, vestibular neuritis is also ruled out if the patient has hearing loss and other neurological deficits. Although these are aligned with a case of our patient, this is still not the best diagnosis given that it's more related to BPP.
Hello. For the next one is Meniere's disease. For Meniere's disease, the symptoms that can rule in includes more common in older age group, 40 to 60 years old, which our patient is 45 years old. There's also the rotatory vertigo. However, there is no history of hearing loss or tinnitus, which is important as Meniere's disease triad includes highly specifies the hearing loss and tinnitus. Episodes last for minutes to hours, and there's no history of Meniere's disease, which Meniere's disease often presents as a cyclical in nature, wherein there's active symptoms, then followed by remission for the cycle. Then the other symptoms to rule out the Meniere's disease includes positive for nausea, and there's also no weakness and numbness and no loss of consciousness, which would not suggest that the Meniere disease is the likely diagnosis.
Next would be orthostatic hypotension. So this refers to the drop in blood pressure of more than 20 millimeter mercury systolic or more than 10 millimeter mercury diastolic BP. So symptoms that may rule in orthostatic hypotension include nausea, upright positional change, blurred vision, generalized weakness, and lightheadedness. So in the case of our patient, only nausea is present. So moreover, rather than rotatory dizziness, orthostatic hypotension is more often associated with lightheadedness. Then as for ruling out, our patient does not presents with no significant changes in BP, which is needed in order to diagnose OH, as well as the patient's symptoms are more related to head positions. So although sinabi sa case natin na the patient's trigger is head changes in head position, so not necessarily upright positional change. And then next slide. So we also listed some unlikely differentials wherein the conditions they're unlikely due to the absence of certain triggers or symptoms, such as in central vestibular disorders, which presents with neurological deficits, as well as cervical vertigo, which is associated with neck pain or stiffness. So patient did not present with a history of neck injuries or neck conditions such as cervical spondylitis as well. So these are unlikely.
These are the common diagnostic tests we can use for differential diagnosis. They may help us distinguish between peripheral and central causes of vertigo. The Dix-Hallpike maneuver is used to evaluate BPPV. This maneuver provokes vertigo and nystagmus, which may be suggestive of the disease. It is performed by turning the patient's head 45 degrees to one side, then quickly lay them back with the head extended off the bed and observe for nystagmus or vertigo. Next slide, please. Next, the head impulse test. It assesses the function of the vestibulo-ocular reflex, which may help to differentiate peripheral vestibular disorders from central causes. It is performed by asking the patient to fixate on a target while they quickly rotate their head to one side and observe for a corrective eye movement. A corrective saccade may be suggestive of a peripheral cause, while an absent saccade, despite the presence of vertigo, may be indicative of a central cause.
For the test of skew, the test of skew detects the vertical ocular misalignment or skew deviation. To perform, the patient is asked to cover one eye for a few seconds, then uncover it and watch for vertical eye realignment. A positive skew deviation or vertical realignment of the eyes when one is covered and uncovered is indicative of a central vertigo. Next, neuroimaging may also be helpful to confirm and locate lesions in the central nervous system causing vertigo. Some of these are MRI with diffuse weighted imaging, CT scan, and CT angiogram.
We can also use additional diagnostic tools to confirm the diagnostics. We have electronystagmography or videonystagmography, which tests caloric responses and records other eye movements and is usually normal in BPPV. ENG is indicated only if an alternative vestibular disease is suspected by history or examination. And then we have vestibular evoked myogenic potentials testing, which evaluates the function of the autolytic organ, specifically the saccule, via cervical VEMP and utricle via ocular VEMP. So these structures contribute to balance and spatial orientation. Although BPPV primarily affects the semicircular canals, this can help identify any additional or underlying autolytic dysfunction. So this may suggest a more complex or recurrent vestibular pathology. Next slide, please. Hearing tests are essential to rule out inner ear disorders that may mimic or coexist with your BPPV, such as your Meniere's disease or vestibular neuritis. So odometry, if performed, is typically normal.
So for non-pharmacological, benign paroxysmal positional vertigo is primarily managed through non-pharmacological methods with cannulate repositioning maneuvers or CRMs being the most effective first line and remain the gold standard for BPPV treatment due to its high efficacy and low risk of side effects treatment. So for cannulate repositioning maneuver, CRM, its mechanism is the CRM maneuvers aim to move displaced otolite debris from the semicircular canals back to the utricle where they no longer cause vertigo. So first we have the Epley maneuver, which is for posterior canal BPPV. So it is the most common CRM and also the most effective used maneuver for posterior canal BPPV. Patients should be informed that nausea, occasional vomiting, and or a sense of falling may arise during the procedure. Those who previously manifested severe nausea and or vomiting during the diagnosis may be offered antiemetic prophylaxis 30 to 60 minutes prior to CRM. So Next, we have the Semont maneuver, which is for posterior canal BPPV. So it is a rapid side-to-side movement and may be more intense but quicker and useful in cases resistant to Epley maneuver. Next, we have the Lempert roll maneuver. So it is also used for horizontal, lateral semicircular canal BPPV, also known as the barbecue roll maneuver. So next, the Hamid maneuver. We also have the Hamid maneuver, which is typically applied in more complex or multi-canal BPPV cases. So for next, we have the patient education and counseling. It is an essential initial step in managing BPPV. So patients should be oriented with the following: the nature of BPPV, which is benign and often self-limiting but prone to recurrence. The importance of compliance with exercises and follow-ups, avoidance of risky positions like sleeping on the affected side, safety strategies to prevent falls during acute episodes, and reassurance that BPPV is not a sign of serious brain disorder. And lastly, we have referral to specialists. While posterior canal BPPV is typically managed in primary care, referral to neurologist or otolaryngologist is warranted for lateral, anterior, or multi-canal BPPV, which are harder to treat. Suspected central causes of vertigo, recurrent or treatment-resistant cases, and also consideration of vestibular rehabilitation therapy referral for chronic or complex cases.
For pharmacologic management, according to the American Academy of Otolaryngology, head and neck surgery for benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, medications are not routinely recommended for treatment of BPPV. However, these can be used to manage autonomic symptoms like nausea and vomiting for severely symptomatic patients with vertigo episodes that are frequent and are already disruptive to daily function. Medications like vestibular suppressants like meclizine and antihistamine is the most commonly used medication with doses ranging from 25 milligrams to 100 milligrams daily. Other medications that are also indicated in memes are antiemetics like ondansetron, metoclopramide, promethazine or prochlorperazine can be used to control nausea and vomiting, and benzodiazepines as well as dopamine antagonists can also be used as vestibular suppressants.
Moving on to prognosis, BPPV actually has a favorable prognosis, especially on this patient presenting with brief and positional symptoms. Although its natural history is not well studied, it is widely accepted that untreated episodes usually resolve spontaneously over days to weeks. In fact, in a case series involving 108 patients with posterior BPPV who did not receive canalith repositioning maneuvers, their positional vertigo symptoms disappeared at a mean of 39 days. But of course, as was mentioned earlier, there are effective treatments available, such as proper repositioning maneuvers. And in these cases, most patients would experience significant and rapid relief, often within just 1 to 2 sessions. And however, although BPPV can resolve on its own, there are 2 issues. First, in some patients, they experience residual non-positional vague dizziness or imbalance that actually persists. And this was correlated with age and osteoporosis to be risk factors. And then the second one, recurrences are fairly common even after successful management with repositioning maneuvers. In fact, around 30 to 50% of patients may experience recurrences within 1 to 5 years. But again, repeated treatment is usually just as effective. In fact, less than 1% require surgery, and it's usually reserved for refractory cases. For the risk factors of recurrence, it's the same as the risk factors of BPPV as well: older age, female sex, those with comorbid vascular risk factors such as diabetes, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, osteoporosis, and vitamin D deficiency. However, although there is a persistence of symptoms and recurrences, these should not alarm the patients because BPPV is not a life-threatening condition and there is a low risk of complications. It does not cause any permanent neurological deficits, and it responds well to repositioning maneuvers and would resolve on its own even without treatment. So that's it for our presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, thank you, Group 8, for the extensive discussion on BPPV, no, from neuroanatomy and the management for BPPV. So before ako add or mag-clarify ng mga bagay, are there any questions from the class for the group? Wala naman. So you can message here in case na bigla kayong magkaroon ng question. So sige. For vertigo or dizziness, no, pag dumadating yung patient sa clinic, kahit kayo din, once you enter clinical sa ER, most of the time yan, you'll encounter a lot of cases presenting with dizziness. And the first question is always, is this central or peripheral vertigo? Kasi dalawa kaming nagmamanage ng vertigo. No? It's ENT and neuro. And the worst case scenario is always, of course, a neurologic cause of vertigo, central cause of vertigo. So yun yung, kaya ang nangyayari is sa neuro siya una nare-refer. So yun yung real scenario sa ER. So we have to rule out central causes of vertigo. And to do that, you still have to do your complete neurologic exam and your complete history taking. For this patient, strictly rotatory dizziness, wala naman siyang other neurologic findings or neurologic symptoms na present, like pointing to a cerebral or brainstem or cerebellar localization. So, na-pinpoint natin siya agad to peripheral. And then, after localizing it as peripheral vertigo, next comes etiology. So, ano ba yung nagkukos ng peripheral vertigo niya? And you mentioned all of those possible differential diagnoses earlier. And those diagnoses have different constellation of symptoms. So, dun papasok din yung presentation ng patient. Like kasi pag peripheral vertigo, almost same yung character ng ng vertigo nila. Brief, sudden, severe nausea, vomiting, nag-iiba lang minsan yung duration and response to treatment. So, that's why you have to know ano yung possible na etiology para yung management natin dun siya magde-depend. So, you've mentioned earlier yung Meniere's disease. So, if the patient comes in with vertiginous symptoms plus tinnitus hearing loss, yun na agad yung isa mong consideration. Kasi in BPPV, rarely naman na may kasamang hearing loss and tinnitus. So, vestibular neuritis, medyo mahirap i-differentiate. But malalaman mo siya when you do your Dix-Hallpike, yung mga diagnostic test natin. For vestibular neuritis, you can also ask patients if they have prior history of infections. Sometimes may prior na mga may prior na colds, no, mga viral illnesses na pwede rin na-affect yung vestibular nerve. So it's the vestibular nerve that is involved in vestibular neuritis. Ano pa bang closest differential? Well, yung migraine, it can be vertiginous in nature. Pwedeng hindi siya headache eh. Pwede siyang vertiginous migraine. But the character is still peripheral, tapos episodic, and improves with treatment ng migraine. But most, if not all, meron pa ring headache. Pag purely siya na vertiginous migraine lang or vertiginous symptom for a migraine, medyo mahirap siya i-differentiate sa ibang causes din ng vertigo. What else? So for those mentioned maneuvers, how to differentiate types of vertigo, no? Mas marami pa kayong na-discuss kaysa dun sa lecture ko. So that's good. Yung Dix-Hallpike, paulit-ulit kanina, na it's usually for posterior canal. Remember, your semicircular canals, tatlo yan. You have posterior, anterior, and then lateral. So for Dix-Hallpike, it's mostly for posterior and sometimes pwede rin siya sa anterior. And then yung lateral canal, no, instead of Dix-Hallpike, you can do the supine roll test. So it's still lying supine, but instead of turning the head 30 to 45 degrees on one side, you ask the patient to lie flat and then turn the head 90 degrees to the side quickly. So, kasi lateral lang eh. So, hindi mo kailangan i-turn initially yung head. So, you ask the patient to turn the head 90 degrees left, right, and then check again for nystagmus, check again for kung ma-trigger na yung dizziness, and then if not, go to the other side. So, ganun din. Same yung tinitignan nyo, nystagmus and trigger ng vertigo. So, with these maneuvers kasi, you are able to tell or localize which semicircular canal is involved. And this will trigger you kung anong klaseng maneuver yung gagawin nyo for non-pharmacologic treatment. Kasi yung Eplys, it's for posterior canal lang din, no? Iba pa yung mga ibang maneuvers. No? So meron yung mga log rolling test, yung iba na mention nyo kanina, mga Semont. Yan. Okay, so that's the significance of doing those maneuvers. So for BPPV, ang cause kasi niya, it's the otoconia that was placed dun sa semicircular canal due to dependence or yun, na-dislodge siya from the cupula. So, eventually, it can spontaneously resolve. Kasi sa paulit-ulit mo rin namang ginagalaw yung head mo, pwede talaga siyang ma-dislodge na doon. Even not doing the Eplys maneuver and other maneuvers. The problem with BPPV is sometimes it's severe na ayaw syempre ng patient ma-experience yung symptom as well as vomiting, nagiging disabled sa work, na very uncomfortable. And dito papasok yung medication. So the discussed medication earlier are mostly vestibular suppressants. No? So it acts peripherally and centrally para hindi mo masyado ma-perceive yung dizziness. But it doesn't address the main cause of dizziness. So symptomatic relief lang siya. So for BPPV, na susuppress niya yung hilo until such time na spontaneously mag-resolve yung otoliths. For vestibular neuritis, it tries to suppress again the dizziness until mag-heal yung vestibular nerve. No? So for Meniere's disease, the problem is the endolymphatic flow. So until ma-address yon, pwede rin ma-suppress yung dizziness with medication. So, yun lang yung purpose of meclizine, cinnarizine, betahistine. So, there are all vestibular suppressants. It doesn't address the primary cause of the dizziness. Kaya, in some patients, even if after you remove or discontinue those medications, pwede pa rin talaga bumalik. Pwedeng bumalik yung dizziness if hindi pa siya na yung primary cause of the dizziness is not yet resolved. Okay, so these medications are mainly antihistaminergics. So yun yung main purpose nila. You mentioned earlier benzodiazepines. So benzodiazepines, Rivotril, alprazolam. So these are broad spectrum na mechanism, anxiolytic, sedative, anticonvulsant, but it can also suppress dizziness by inhibiting nerve impulses. No? So, yung overactivity ng vestibular system mo na susuppress mo. Kaya, nawawala din yung hilo. So, in some patients with very severe vertigo sa ER, what we do instead of giving betahistine, give diazepam. No? Nakakatulog sila and then sometimes pagkagising nila, okay sila. So, may mga ganong cases. What else? Okay. So, yun, no? So, we have pharma and non-pharmacologic. For BPPV, very brief lang talaga, but it can be intermittent or recurrent. If it persists for a long time, then baka hindi lang siya BPPV, mamaya vestibular neuritis pala talaga siya. But with vestibular neuritis, hindi siya magi-improve with Epley's maneuver. Also, when you do Dix-Hall-Pike, you can actually elicit some of the symptoms na will point you out to a left or right ear problem. No? So yun lang, pero hindi mo alam kung kung semicircular ka na. No? So yun. So may ma-elicit ka ding nystagmus more on the right side, ganyan. So yun yung kaya ginagawa pa rin namin yung Dix-Hall-Pike even if hindi primarily BPPV yung ine-entertain mo. Okay. Sige. So far, may questions ba? Dun sa group na nag-discuss, may questions kayo about the case? Wala naman. Okay. So meron lang nag-message i-share ko lang din yung answer kasi meron nag-message sa akin sa Canvas about the lecture. So yung about betahistine also. So that is CIRC. When is it recommended to be taken? Is it during the actual attacks or about to have an attack? So these medications are symptomatic. So more of abortive siya. If you don't feel any dizziness, then you don't need to take it. What we do with our patients is we maintain the medication for a few days. If it's BPPV, I maintain it for a week. No? High dose, 24 milligrams twice a day for a week. No? To give time na spontaneously mag-resolve yung otoliths natin. But if you are planning to do Epley's maneuver in a patient with BPPV, we recommend to hold the betahistine on the day of the procedure. Why? Kasi hindi mo malalaman kung nag-improve. Kasi nakasuppress na-suppress mo yung dizziness. So with Epley's maneuver kasi inaalam mo kung mai-induce mo din yung dizziness, and if you do it every day, you can see improvement, nababawasan yung dizziness nila. So we hold the medication if you're planning to do the maneuver. Ano pa yung next question? Ayan. So if is it normal to manifest nystagmus after riding any moving vehicle or mga rides, no? So, yes, pwede, no? Yung na-present kasi sa lecture are pathologic na nystagmus. But we also have what we call physiologic nystagmus. Physiologic nystagmus it's a normal variant of the oculomotor function, and it can be elicited, no, normally. So if you remember your neuro PE, when we do EOM testing, we try to move our finger as the examiner. We try to move the finger to the farthest na ano to, that the patient can see, no, to elicit endpoint nystagmus. So other than that, pwede rin per-rotational nystagmus that can occur if there is sustained head rotations. So yun, kapag nagre-rides nga kayo, pwede kayo talaga magkaroon ng jerk nystagmus. Even after, pwede rin siya, no? But as physiologic nystagmus, dapat mawawala din siya. So yun. And then wala siya masyadong iba pang associated symptoms. Walang neurologic symptoms. Well, you can elicit also dizziness pag na pinaikot-ikot ka, di ba? But it will eventually improve. So yun. And then evaluation, tapos shake the head of the patient from side to side as evaluation of dizziness. So, is there a minimum number of times or enough na siya na makaka-elicit ka ng dizziness? So, yun yung question. For the maneuver, either yung pag-head thrust, head impulse test, you don't need to repeat it naman multiple times as long as you were able to trigger the dizziness. But what we do it a few times para makita mo na reproducible siya. So sure ka na every time you do it on this side, you elicit the vertigo. No? Mamaya kasi one time lang, tapos no, sa inulit mo, second time, wala na kaagad. So hindi ka sure masyado pag ganon. And you also have to note that, di ba, pag peripheral vertigo, your vertigo is fatigable. So, with multiple times na ulit-ulitin mo yung maneuver, eventually, pwede siyang mag-wane. Pwedeng mawala yung response. So, that's a key characteristic ng peripheral versus central vertigo. So, wala siyang standard number of times for any maneuver as long as it's reproducible, but it can also see fatigability nung pag-elicit ng dizziness. Okay? So, I think yun lang naman on my end. Meron ba kayong questions for your sa lecture? Tingnan ko kung meron bang mga mahihirap na topic. So, at least, no, yung peripheral part of the vertigo or mga ear disease, you also encounter this in your ENT. So, may pagka-review din siya. Walang problem with deafness dun sa topic ng deafness. So, definitely you have to differentiate what is peripheral and central. Then, kung peripheral, what is conductive and sensory neural. So, any part of the auditory pathway starting from the nuclei of your cochlear nuclei upward upward to the cerebrum is already considered central. So affectation of the nuclei, it can still be peripheral yung symptom kasi ano siya from the nuclei to the nerve, ano siya considered peripheral nervous system siya. But if you inflict yung nuclei, then most likely yung etiology can also affect surrounding structures in the brainstem. Saan bang part ng brainstem ang vestibulocochlear nerve? Is it midbrain, pons, or medulla? Saan ang location ng ating vestibulocochlear nerve? It's actually still in the pons. No? Pons. Pero it's near already the pontomedullary angle. Malapit na siya doon. So sa lower pons. So if you have a problem at that area, possible na hindi lang hearing and balance yung problem natin. You can also have other neurologic findings. So pwede kang may neurologic findings plus peripheral cranial nerve 8 problem. Yun. So you have to look at the picture as a whole pa din, not just the hearing and balance problem. Okay. Ano pa ba? So na-discuss nyo din yung ibang evaluation of hearing and balance. So tinnitus is almost always a peripheral nerve problem. For dizziness, vertigo. Yan. So, na-mention ko, di ba, pag rotatory, that is the definition of vertigo. But most of you, no, if not all, most likely experience dizziness na. Meron ba ditong pinalad na hindi pa nakakaranas ng hilo? Sobrang swerte nun. But if you will notice, no, it's really difficult to describe dizziness. It can be a feeling of lightheadedness, near syncope, yan, or feeling of imbalance, or something lang na parang feeling mo weird na hindi mo ma-explain. So you really have to elicit descriptions from your patient. If they cannot describe it themselves, you can probe, you can give trigger words, no? Para kayo mismo matulungan sa pag localize and form ng diagnosis. What else? Yan. So for balance, you can always have feeling of imbalance even with vertigo. But you have to differentiate. It's very, very important kung is this cerebellar pathway or central in origin. So I mentioned important yung physiologic considerations for balance in the lecture because these are factors that you have to look at in a patient presenting with imbalance. So is there a problem with the eyes or the muscles of the eyes? No? So sometimes if yung patient may problem, sasabihin niya, Dok, nahihilo ako. So yung pala, naduduling siya kasi meron siyang cranial nerve 3 neuropathy. So hindi pantay yung paningin niya. So pwedeng mamali na kayo doon if you will localize it as or if you will think na cranial nerve 8 or vestibular system pathology yung cause, no? So you have to look at the eyes and the eye muscles. You have to look at the labyrinths or the ear in general. And then lastly, you also have to look at joints and muscles. So in some patients who are diabetic, they have peripheral neuropathy or they have vitamin B12 deficiency, nagkaroon sila ng subacute combined degeneration na tinatawag sa spine. So ang affected is the dorsal column. Those problems can cause imbalance because their body cannot perceive yung sarili nila sa environment. So if you see these patients, they might walk with wide-based gait, may tendency to fall on either side, no? So looking at these, pwede mo rin ma-differentiate if it's peripheral or it's central, no? So if the patient has imbalance with or with eyes closed, is it on one side all the time? Is it bilateral? So yun yung mga tinitingnan natin dito sa 3 considerations. Okay, vertigo, napag-usapan na natin. And then the nystagmus. Very difficult. In practice, in the clinics, very difficult really to describe nystagmus. No? Kung titignan niyo yung video, di ba parang ang hirap. Yung rotational, torsional, well, madali yung horizontal and vertical, no? So, and then you have to look pa kung saan yung fast and slow component ni nystagmus. So, yan. But for now, you just try to remember the difference between central and peripheral nystagmus. Pa. So yan, yung vertiginous syndromes, I gave this table lang so that you can, in the future, if you encounter patients with dizziness, no, you know what to look at then to determine the localization of the problem. Is it central, peripheral? And then if it is central, where along the vestibular system yung problem. And then for central causes, yan, there can be a lot. There can be a lot. Okay, last, for faintness and syncope, may questions ba kayo dito? Or ano naman, easy to understand? For syncope, in general, parang yung mechanisms given, in general, they will all lead to reduction in the blood flow to the brain. Now, what caused that reduction in blood flow? Yun lang yung tinitignan natin to organize ano yung etiology or pathophysiology ng syncope. Okay. So, doon din magde-determine yung treatment natin. Sa syncope. Yeah. So yung convulsive syncope, no? I included that sa last part, yung differentiation between syncope and seizure, because it happens, no? The patients coming in sa ER, first time seizure, pero on history, na-elicit na, may pallor prior, may or may dimming of vision prior to the loss of consciousness, no? So it's still syncopal. The reason bakit nag-convulse is that medyo mas matagal yung duration ng decreased cerebral blood flow. So kaya nag-trigger na, kumbaga parang nag-short circuit yung brain because of the lack of cerebral blood flow leading to convulsion. But important here is that you get the history prior. no? Kasi yun yung main determinant eh. Some patients, medyo same yung during and after. But for syncope, mostly wala silang post-ictal events or post-ictal symptoms. So yun yung pinaka-differentiating sa after. Yan. Kasi syempre, if it's seizure, iba yung treatment natin. Kaya very important to differentiate. Pag syncope, you have to determine cardiac ba yan, you have to work out yung etiology. Kasi bigyan mo ng anti-seizure, yung pala meron siyang sick sinus syndrome, yung mga ganon. Eh di, hindi mo na-treat yung mismong cause ng convulsions. So, babalik pa rin tayo sa history taking, ayan, sa evaluation. History taking and physical and neurologic exams. Then add on na lang, of course, yung ancillary test to confirm the etiology. Okay, so I think yun lang naman. No more questions? Okay, so if there's none, thank you to section B, group 8 for discussing peripheral vertigo and BPPV extensively, no? So we'll definitely get a high grade naman for this. And then for the exam, mostly naman we'll be getting it in the lecture. Supplemental is Adams lang. So if you want to read more, understand more, no, you can read again Adams. Of course, hindi lang siya, you're in Euro 2 na, hindi na lang siya recall. It can be more of application. So, yun. Okay, so if no other questions, we can end early. Thank you for your attention. Okay. Bye, guys.